Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's project is this cute fairy card in a Lavinia stamp style, and I've done a lot of colour blending, so I've done a fast forwarded video to show you the whole technique all the way through. I've stamped the Lavinia fairy stamp, I've stamped little gold globes, and I've stamped ferns and foliage hanging down from the top. So it's a full project, but it's also a technique video. I'm showing you the whole technique with some sped up. Hope you enjoy it and stay tuned. To start with, first of all, I'm going to explain that I've sped this video up. It's not something I normally do, but this was a blend that took quite a long while. So I wanted to, on this video, show you how I did the whole thing, but I don't want to bore you with the intricacies of blending and blending over and over, which took quite a long while to do. So what I've done is I've recorded the whole video, which was about 45 minutes long, and I'm playing it at 3 times the speed so that you can see the effect. So I started off with a distress oxide. I hadn't actually got a yellow in the Lavinia ink, so I just used a basic distress ink in, I think, a bright yellow colour, lemonade, I think, and then just laid that first layer of yellow. And then the other inks I'm using are the Elements inks from Lavinia, and there you go, you can see that yellow distress oxide. So I sort of started off in the middle of the card, and then I'm just building the colour around the card. So I started with a yellow, and then I'm working my way through an orange, basically. What you will find is that some of the inks blend better than others, and then I'm adding a green, and you'll see at the start there's quite a distinct layer between them, but by the time you finish you'll find that that evens out. So I'm keeping going, and I'm using the distress ink in the middle, the Elements inks around the edge. I'm applying them using a stencil brush, which is one of the ones from Lavinia. And you can see I went round, first of all I did the yellow, then I did the orange, then I did the green, and now I'm using a blue. So I'm going over both the green and the orange with a very faint blue. One of the tricks is to use some scrap paper on the back. So you take the bright colour off when you put ink on the brush, so that you don't make any distinct shapes or any distinct lines. And then with very little ink on the brush, you're then just going over and over and over. And that's one of the reasons for speeding this up, because this is a long process. It takes quite a long while. So you can see me there loading the brush up, taking the excess off on the paper before I then go in. Now I'm darkening specifically in the corners because I want some kind of darkness in the corners for interest. Also helps with the 3D effect of the actual card. And we're trying to create a focal point here. So you saw me right at the beginning. I'm using a Lavinia stamp. It's a little fairy with a lantern, which is quite cute. I'm just going to put that in the middle of the card, so that will be the yellow area. And then what I want is a fade out from that yellow area through orange into green with a blue over the top. So I'm just constantly working over and over. And that's the thing with this technique. You keep going back to the colour that you've used. You add another colour, you blend it in, you go back with the original colour. You just keep going over and over and over and layering. If you try to achieve this quickly, you never will. It never works. You have to kind of put the work in. So start with your lightest colour, work your way through to the darkest colour, and each time you add a new colour, you go back. So layer the yellow, add orange, go back with the yellow, go back with the orange, go back with the yellow. It's a long-winded process, but ultimately, hopefully, you end up with a nice blend. And you can see I'm just working my way around it. I mean, this is a bit of an arm ache, it has to be said. Takes a while, but basically you get there in the end. And you can see the blue is darkening the green, and we've got quite a nice fade going on between the different shades. So you just keep going round and round and working, basically. You can see there we've ended up with quite a nice blend. Darken the edges, and then look, I'm going back in with the yellow now. So I'm now brightening up the middle just to make sure that that's as bright as it can be, blending that into the orange. Then I'm going around again with the orange, just blending that into the green, checking the stamp for the size, and then I'm using my heat gun. So apologies, this is slightly out of focus, but obviously the camera is catching the end of the heat gun and focusing to that. It takes a second or two to just sort of reorganize itself and go back to the actual project. Going back in with the green now, you'll notice I'm using a little piece of scrap paper there just to kind of hold the project in place. I don't want fingerprints on it. And then putting it in my stamping machine, I'm using an anti-static pad. Want to make sure, because it's a piece of wet paper that I've dried, just make sure it's absolutely bone dry. At this point, I'm lining it up obviously in my stamping machine to use the fairy stamp, and I'll get that. I'm going to use some VersaFine Clear. I think I stamped this in a green colour. I thought, well, I'll keep the tone of this green. I'd normally stamp the main thing in black, but on this occasion I decided to go with green. I warmed the stamp up in my hand first of all. It's a brand new stamp, so just in case it had any dust or anything on it, kind of cleaned it with my hand just to make sure, put some oils on from the skin, that kind of helps it work. And because this is in a stamping platform, I can stamp it a few times just to make sure I get a really good impression. The first one actually looked good. I mean, these Lavinia stamps are absolutely brilliant quality, but I did just stamp it a second time just to make sure I'd got that sort of nice deep colour. I didn't heat emboss this with clear powder, which I normally would do. I decided to leave it sort of matte and a little bit ethereal. So I've now got my main image stamped in the centre of the card. That's on the yellow area. I kind of wanted the light to be where the figure was and leave the rest going darker. I'm going to edge this with some different Lavinia stamps. I'm going to add some bubbles and bits of interest, etc. So I've now got my main image. I've got my blend. The blend doesn't look great at the moment, but it will when I start adding in all the leaves and things that are going to go around the edge. So at this point we've kind of done most of the card. It's now that piece where we need to go and find our edging stamps, decide what we're going to do, top, bottom, middle. And you can see there I'm just pulling out lots of different stamps, lots of different leaves, some different kind of ferns and things for texture. I'm also going to add some rolling hills in here just to give it a little bit of 3D. And you can see here, these are the Lavinia hill masks. You get 4 or 5 in the set. They've got different sort of hills on either side of different gradients, some are mountains. Find the one that works for you. Think whether you're going to ink from the top or the bottom. On this one, we want to ground our fairy so she's actually standing on something. So I'm inking off the bottom and I'm using one of the colours that I've worked with, which is, I think, one of the greens. So I'm creating a basic line just to give her some ground. Basically makes an amazing difference, as you can see straight away. And then I'm deciding which other hills we're going to have in here, and as I'm inking these, they're kind of gradienting out in terms of depth, just giving sort of different effects really, just in the background. Some of them are very subtle, some a little bit more, but once you see them you kind of see them, so it just gives her a little bit of a landscape to be present in rather than just floating mid-air in the middle of a card. So you can see there. What I'm now going to do, I'm now going to stamp some ferns down the bottom, and there's a way of doing this that Tracy at Lavinia shows you, where you stamp first, gives you a good clear impression. The second stamp you do is kind of like a shadow stamp, and it gives you an almost secondary stamp, which is a faded one. It kind of suggests that things are in different places. Some are in the foreground, some are in the background. You can see there I'm stamping, and then occasionally I'm stamping a second or third image. And that just gives you different variants of strength. So it kind of implies that you're in the middle of a ferny meadow. You can see the effect there. Apologies, it's the wrong way around. And basically, this also adds depth. Typically, darker on the corners, height on the edges, lower in the middle. Again, it pulls your focus to the central focal point of the card. Now I'm taking off my leaves, and I'm going to do kind of different leaves at the top. Again, in one of the similar colour palettes to what we've used. So I think this is a dark green, I think. But basically just checking what that leaf looks like and how hard I need to press to get a good impression. And I'm actually just turning that leaf stamp around. It looks a little bit odd, sped up, I know, but just trying to, in the interest of time, get this done. So you can see there, again, stamping off so that I get different impressions. It doesn't matter if they're not all perfectly stamped. It kind of just gives it more variation. Sometimes you get a little bit of an outline, sometimes you get the whole thing and it's dark. Doesn't really matter because we're also going to add other textures around it. So we've got our top and bottom now pretty much. This is a sort of traditional look for a fairy type card where your fairy is central and you've got all different elements all around it basically. At this point, I think I'm probably deciding, okay, what else am I going to add at the top? So I've found something dangly, so I'm going to add those. And I think I do these in a blue. So again, just double check what it looks like when you stamp it. First impression, second impression, and then we're adding again. And you'll notice hanging down more on the sides so that we're creating our frame, shorter in the middle and varying the length. So this is becoming a fairy in a beautiful glade, and obviously looks quite different than it did when it was just a fairy in the middle of a colour blend. So we've got our predominantly main image now. What I'm now doing is taking one of those colours I've stamped, so I'm starting at the top. Because I've stamped those hanging fronds in blue, I'm then going over that top with a blue, and I'm creating a darkness. So I want a darkness in the corner, and I want a darkness on the top. So I'm going around. Again, this is helping frame the card, and it's also helping pull your focus and attention to the central figure, which is where it's all about, really. So heating that, giving that a good heat, make sure I'm setting those colours. And then similarly, I'll probably go in at the bottom as well and do something to darken that. Oh no, in fact at this point, this is where I get my pencils out. These are just normal coloured pencils. I go over the lantern in yellow just to kind of give that a little bit of light. A couple of different shades there just on the edges of the sort of pumpkin shaped lantern. And then I'm probably going to colour in things like the hat, and I'll pull out those circular elements on the fairy's dress as well. There's quite a few little circular bits at the top of the skirt, so I'll probably give those some colour as well. So first of all, the hat for a bit of fun. So we've done that in a red, mischievous fairy, using a couple of different shades of red, obviously darkening one bit, lightening the other, so that it gives it a kind of 3D effect. And now I think I'm finding another colour. Here we go, purple. So purple is going to be her dress. Just the tiny little circular elements, just giving them all a little bit of colour. And then I will go over those with a white Posky pen, just to give it a little bit of accent, I guess. Actually, I think I use a jelly pen on that. But again, it's always good to work out where your light is coming from, and do that on one side. There we go. It's one of those gel pens. So I warm that up in my hands just to make sure the ink is free flowing. Always check your ink before you start, just in case you've got a blob. And quite quickly, although sped up, I'm obviously going around those circles, just bringing those to life, giving those a little bit of 3D effect. Similarly on the lantern as well, a few white elements there. And then on the wings, I'm calling out a few bits. Before I go over the wings with my Wink of Stella, just to give it a sort of a sparkly effect. I'm also grounding her a little bit around her feet by just creating a little bit of shadow. And just on the crest of that first hill, because that's the one closest to it, giving that a little bit, and also the two behind, just to give it a little bit more depth. Now I'm warming up my Stella pen, just checking that glitter's coming out, before I then go over her wings, just to give them a kind of a white, milky sheen, make them look like fairy wings rather than just something that's the same texture as everything else. So I'm giving that a little bit of glitter, a little bit of sparkle, giving that a heat. Again, apologies that the heat gun is in focus and the card isn't. There we go. And that's starting to look quite nice. Now I've got my gold pen. Now this is where I have a disaster. So I tap my gold pen and get lots of lovely little gold sparkles on there. And then the first blob I do, which to add to the sparkles, I get a great big blob of gold. So slightly adjusted plan here. I was always going to add some sort of fairy circles in, but I decided to actually cover up that great big blob behind her head with one of my fairy globes. So this is again a set from Lavinia. It's quite useful for fairies and underwater, and basically it's got 3 different globes of different sizes with different textures. So I take one of those in blue and I stamp that right behind the head so that I can then use that gold as part of that. And then what I do is I stamp others of these in different depths, so some of them are stamped off so that they're not so bright, others are bright, just so that they match up. And basically that just gets rid of that horrible golden mistake that I made. But remember, there are no mistakes in card making. Nobody else knew that I did that incorrectly, and that was an accident. So I'm then going to take my gold Posca pen, go in and colour them all with a little bit of gold in the hole so that they all look the same. Remembering that I don't need to press hard on my Posca pen so that I get a huge blob of gold ink. So I'm just dotting around the actual globes, filling in some of the holes that are part of the stamp, and then filling in a bit of gold in the middle just to give that a bit of 3D texture. This is actually looking almost done, so I think a little bit more highlighting, a little bit more gold accenting, and we're pretty much there with this card. And then what I do in the end, I go around the edges with some gilding polish and just drag some gold onto the card before I mount it on some black paper just to give it a frame, and then I mount it on a 7x5 card blank. I'm not actually putting a sentiment on this, I'm just leaving this all about the image. It's a beautiful stamp by Lavinia. It's really delicate and there's a lot of detail in it, so I don't want to fuss it up with a sentiment, etc., which would draw focus away from it. I also use my pencil there just to give the wings a little bit more colour, and I think I go over them again for extra sparkle. So I'm quite happy with this card and how it looks, and I will show you the finished look in a minute once it's been sort of finished off with the gold gilding polish, and also then when it's mounted and ready on its white card blank. I'm cleaning and putting all my stuff away. I tend to tidy as I go along because I hate that great big huge job at the end. So I give all my stamps a clean with a damp cloth. Best thing to clean them with. Don't use whites because they're not good for the environment, and also they leave fibres on your stamps. You're much better to use an old flannel or an old duster that's been washed a few times and all the loose fibres have been got rid of. So give everything a clean, give everything a wipe and put it away, and then finish your project. Always also give your work surface a wipe. And here's today's finished project. You can see I've mounted it on black and then on a white 7x5 card blank. It's a nice looking card with our beautiful fairy, our globes, highlighted in gold, which you can't see too well in this light, but it really is a beautiful image. Thanks for watching today. If you like this technique video, please give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe maybe to my channel, Crafts by John UK, on Etsy, Instagram, and all over basically, on TikTok too. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.